So I'm going to launch right into my presentation, and I like a little bit of humor, of course. People that know me or may follow me on the Twitter, I kind of like to use humor. Where this comes from, actually, I didn't take this picture; somebody else did, but this was taken at a Holiday Inn Express, and we've got, I think, full saturation of the drones at the next to the snacks. And, so where's the 1 in 25 million? Well, Pew Research came out and said that 8% of the American population owns drones. So that should put us somewhere in about 25 million drones. And I don't know what all the classifications are on that, but, it could go down to the mini flyer here, I don't know. This is kind of a snapshot in time and I'm using the big LEBOWSKI. I don't know if people are fans of that, but where we are and where I see the industry, I'm kind of amazed that we're here. I thought things would be a little bit further along. A lot of the end users are asking, where's the money? The forecast that I referenced earlier is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing. I don't think it's quite as rosy as that. The standards work is really, ASTM's been going on since 2005. Gene, we were at that meeting in Reno. To date, there is only one civil aviation authority in the world that has adopted one of those standards. And Richard Joy over here was the winner of the trivia question. He got the answer correct, that it was one. And he got that from watching the SUS News Hangout. The standards work is it's kind of a joke. And then also the RTCA, if ever anyone read the WAPO articles on the shenanigans going on the DAC. So RTCA is not much better. That's been going on for almost as long, and not a lot there. I don't think that the FAA has a good handle on what's going on, and I'm not a big fan of the UTM either. As probably people have gathered through a lot of my barbs that I've thrown out there. I'm not really sure that we need UTM everywhere. I definitely believe that we can do, let's say, better training, more endorsements, things like that, for people to operate out in the country. And some of the lobbyists don't like the reference here. They think it's harsh, but it's not every lobbyist, just some of them. Okay, so a few years ago, we had tons of potential. Remember, we were going to do all of this. We're going to do the delivery, and then there's Precision Hawk over there at the end with the Lancaster, which I don't even think they make anymore. We're going to do the drone delivery, which is taking a little bit longer than people would like. I think there's a lot of hurdles for that, and nobody I've met really thinks that that's financially viable. So, since that time, though, we have become part of the aviation community, and I thought this was kind of interesting. Again, on Twitter, the FAA had a safety symposium this month here in April, and some of the concepts that the FAA has for traditional aviation. GA safety record can be affected by personal responsibility. We found that our greatest risk to safety is non-compliance. There's a philosophy here: most people intend to comply with the rules, and non-compliance is a mistake. This might be traditional thinking for aviation, but that's not the thinking in the drone community. And even from the UASIO, we have this. We've moved beyond the remote pilot, and now it's the automation era, which is kind of seems like like it's not in lockstep with what the rest of the FAA is thinking and saying. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between traditional aviation and the droner. I've been making jokes about this, the 107. Most people in this room have 107s. Show of hands. Just, usually more than most at most meetings. I really don't think they could have made the test any easier. There's no practical test, and I make jokes about how, the only way they could make it easier is put it in sugary cereal. And there are a lot of people that still don't have licenses. There's a lot of talk about, we saw yesterday, even DeFazio has introduced some language, let's say, that I would call detrimental to the hobbyist. We got to get rid of that hobby loophole. That 336 has got to go. I don't believe that the AMA hobbyist is the problem. I think it's this guy, right here, going to Best Buy. If you read this, I got this off of Facebook. It's back in business. Thanks, Best Buy. He's got the replacement insurance. And other guys are on here talking about how they did that with their uniques. They crashed them, they bring them back to Best Buy, and they get a new one. That doesn't really sound aviation-y to me. This is a problem in and of itself. And I think that the FAA, if they really want to clamp down on this, need to institute a program where they have point-of-sale registration and some sort of paper that people have to sign off on, that they register at the store and that they are aware that the FAA has rules and regulations governing the NAS. And by buying this, you're going to do that. On the registration task force, Best Buy, Walmart, and the other big box stores said, no, we don't want to do any of that. Probably because it's a hassle, and also that it would chill sales. And I can see that, but I think that's the only credible way to kind of clamp down on what's going on in the NAS. I don't think clamping down on the AMA is going to fix the problem. I also, before I totally get off of that, I also think that the big problem is lack of FAA enforcement. And people say, well, the FAA doesn't really have the manpower to enforce the FARs. Well, why do you even have rules? If you don't have rules, or if you have rules and you're not going to enforce them, then people are eventually, or they're not going to follow them. And if they're not going to follow the rules, then you've really, I don't know what you're doing. You're busy working or whatever. They need to enforce their rules, or they need to create rules that they can enforce. And that was my advice on the small UAS ARC back in 2008. So the other thing that's happening with the Best Buy flyer is we're seeing a trend where the fees you can charge are going down. And this is anybody who's a fan of the hockey stick graph usually wants to see the hockey stick going the other way and not this way. But a few years ago, Ericsson was here at the show, and they were like, oh yeah, we have people doing video inspections of our cell phone towers, and we're paying about $1,000 a tower, sometimes a little more, depending upon where it is, yada yada. So, I talked to a lot of people in this industry as part of my work at sUS News, and people are now getting $350 to do a cell phone tower inspection. And again, it's pretty much the same thing. They get a video and they kind of go around it and get pictures. You can kind of see what's going on. But I have a plan on how to turn that around. I don't think this trend is a good trend. It's going to be hard to make the $82 billion forecast with a trend like this. The other thing that we're starting to see, and I think this was something that I'd mentioned early on or years ago, is that drones are not magical. Drones do collect data, but what kind of data are they collecting? And a lot of people, back with the idea of farm drones and other things, I was like, well, what does that mean? Well, what we're starting to see is, people, oh, well, we're doing map making and surveying and all the rest of this. You're not really a map maker. In this state, you have to be certified by the state. This guy, I went a little bit back and forth with him, and he just says, I got here it is right here. I gave up and sold my drone because too many competitors are making false claims, and there's a backlash because people aren't getting data Well, they're not getting the 2 centimeter quality data. There's also an issue where some of the farming drone imagery is inadequate. And that might be also because we have standards issues with sensors and whatnot. I think all of that needs to be worked out before we can really start delivering, let's say, data as the new oil. I think we're like, data is the new beaver pelt or something at this point, and we need to work up to a refined product. Again, this was a slide from last year, and I tell my students this, I used to teach over here at the Academy of Art, is there are really the 3 kinds of data, and it really, this regulatory data, something that's based on a repeatable process, legal grade that's going to indemnify you from lawsuits or government regulatory action, is really where the money's at. This kind of artistic and this commercial stuff, people are getting $45 for a real estate shot. Even the people that are doing television are getting a lot of pushback from producers saying, hey, that fee's too high, and we'll go on Craigslist and find a guy. And they're yucking it up, and I'm sure there are a lot of producers that are like, hey, that's a good idea. I'm gonna get on Craigslist and find some guy who says that he's licensed and has insurance and whatever else, and he may not. But he's going to do it for the price I want to pay. So I think as a community, we need to work on being here with our new data and the oil concept. This is another slide that was on my Twitter. This is kind of where I see the advocacy right now. I don't see any credible advocacy for not only the commercial end user, but even the hobbyist. I don't want to beat up on the AMA, but I don't believe that the AMA understands who they're up against. Commercial Drone Alliance, the Commercial Drone Alliance is from Hogan Lovells, which is a really big law firm and lobby group. They're worldwide. These people are not horsing around. They have deep pockets, and they are hired guns, and they're working for some of the big tech folks who want to deliver packages. The people that want to deliver packages don't really care too much about the hobbyist or the person that wants to fly for personal enjoyment. And I think that's a bad thing. Drone Manufacturers Alliance has changed to Drone, I think they're the Innovation Alliance or something, which is basically a front group for DJI. I don't really see much more there. What I see happening is we're getting a monopoly, which I don't think is good for business. We're getting a monopoly, and where we have one manufacturer dominating the hardware market, and people are forced to work with them. Monopolies are never a good thing. Node is another, front group for DJI, and they try and say, well, we're talking for the commercial end user, blah blah blah. Not really true. This Drone Alliance letter to Congress to repeal 336 is not good. I don't think coming down on the modeler or the hobbyist is going to fix the compliance issues that we have. It's going to have to be enforcement. I don't know if anybody has seen these slides. This slide, the first graphic on the left was one that was at the first NASA UTM meeting that they had down at Ames, the big one. And I want to say this was Google or Amazon that brought this out. And they had this idea that everyone, the rest of us, could fly below the 200 feet, and then you'd be able to do delivery and whatnot from 200 to 400 feet. When I saw that, people said, oh, well, what do you think? I said, well, to me, this kind of smacks of that FCC bandwidth auction that, they did years ago, and I don't really think that it's going to work for the NAS. These people, this is an overreach. And of course, people are, oh, that Egan guy's crazy, he's wearing the tinfoil hat, that's not what they're talking about. Oh, okay. So we flash forward to this year. This is from the report, the DAC report, Task Group 3, and right in there, they're mentioning the FCC auction of bandwidth. To me, this shows that the people that are on the DAC are, one, kind of unqualified, because nobody that I've talked to in the, like, say, aviation world thinks that that would ever work. People that are on there say, well, we're just throwing out some ideas. Well, to me, you're wasting everyone's time. And then the other thing that I'm seeing here is I'm not seeing any, let's say, quality federal oversight saying, hey, you know what, that's non-starter. We shouldn't even be going there. But this stuff comes out. So I don't know what's going on there. The other thing that I think is interesting, this was another slide. This slide was from the FAA UAS meeting. I don't know who went to that. I didn't go. But I thought this slide was pretty telling. This is Amazon's idea of what UTM is going to look like. And over here, on the manned side, you know, we have ATC, TCAS, ADSB, and the pilot. And over here, on the unmanned side, we have the UTM, vehicle to vehicle, is what the V2V stands for, and detect and avoid here. One side, certified, tried, tested. Over here, not so much. We don't have anything going over here. And people are like, oh, we're going to be delivering packages here by next year. Okay, well that's all traditional, and we got that. This is not, it needs to be certified, and then it needs to interface with this all in a year or 2 years, whatever. That's some pretty lofty goals in my estimation. You know, we're also talking about the drone integration pilot program. I hear they're busying themselves down there in the San Jose area, talking about doing package delivery maybe as part of this UAS integration pilot program. If that goes forward in a populated area like that, I think what that's going to do is tell us that this do no harm and we can, you know, safety of the NASA and all the rest of that was window dressing. Without certified software, certified aircraft, and certified UTM. We'll see what happens. The other thing I think that's kind of funny is this remote ID and tracking everyone's talking about. I haven't really seen anything that I would call credible or viable for ID and tracking. I hear they're talking about tracking less and ID more. ID is going to have some issues. ID is going to have some issues with spoofing and security. The new one that I hear, and this one's even better, is this blockchain UTM. And the beauty of the blockchain UTM too is if it flies over your house, you know, you'll get a royalty or paid for every drone that flies over your house. And I'm like, well, what about aircraft? Yeah, sure, aircraft too, you know. So, you know, you might actually be another income stream on that $82 billion forecast, is drones flying over your house. I think that's a pipe dream. A lot of this stuff, the people on the technology side are not aviation people, and they think a lot of this, like the cell phone app economy, which I don't think is a realistic meshing with aviation. And I'm not even going to get into, you know, some of the examples of the flying cars, like the E-Hang and all that. Anybody in this room ready to ride the E-Hang flying car? So I'm buying tickets. We got one back there. He's ready to go. I'm not flying in anything that's not certified. That's me. I'm crazy that way. So when we talk about UTM, this is you know, people again, they're like, oh, that Egan guy is such an Eeyore. Because I always ask him, like, well, what is this UTM going to look like? You know, how much, where, what does it need to do? You know, how many people is it for? And nobody can really answer any of these questions, which to me, before you go, you know, appointing yourself the grand poobah of the Global UTM Association, you might want to round out answers for some of these questions. So I stole this slide, and it's for critical infrastructure, and you can see some of these would overlay into some sort of traffic management system. And it's something that, you know, first off of the bat is the reliability. This 99.999999% of the time. And that's almost when the FAA talks about safety of Part 121, which is the commercial aircraft that you probably flew here on, the safety record is 10 to the minus 9, which is like this 99.99999% of the time. It's like never happens. So that's what UTM is going to be. My cell phone's not that reliable. Some of the other, the management, performance, it's got to be running all the time. There's got to be redundancy. Security is a big issue. I talked a little bit about that in the ID and tracking thing. I don't want to, some people think that hacker is a bad term, but we'll just call them independent security consultants. Are just waiting for this stuff to come out so they can start spoofing it. Oh, it's gonna be great. We're gonna spoof it. These people think they're gonna track drones. Not happening. That's another thing. I invited 4 different counter UAS companies to come and demo tomorrow their wares, and some were interested. Oh yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, we want to come out here. And so when I started pushing them and the rubber meets the road, no one wants to demonstrate their counter UAS technology. I thought that's kind of interesting. I told them you could come out and you could do a demo. You could invite whoever you want to come out and see this counter UAS technology. They don't even have to pay. That's how important I think it is. Some people say, well, wow, how could you be a drone guy and be a counter UAS guy? Well, I think that we need to be adult, and there are just certain places that these aircraft should not be. Nuclear power plants, airports without authorization, prisons, there's secure locations, other secure locations, government buildings, whatever else. So we have to be realistic about that, but we need a product that actually is going to work. And I was hoping to see some of that, but we're not going to see some of that. The open standards thing, I'm not really, one thing I will say with standards is all of the UTM, ID and tracking and the rest of that all have to have some sort of established standards to work from. Right now, everybody's kind of on their own thing. You see little Periscope deals on Twitter. Oh, UTM's going to be 5G. Every drone's going to have a SIM chip in it, and you're going to be able to do ID and tracking and UTM and everything else. I don't believe that the cell phone network is reliable enough for that. And I still don't believe that you can have a UTM that doesn't have onboard detect and avoid. Because if the system goes down, what are you just going to have a bunch of drones out there flying around that nobody knows where they are? So I think that they could take some keys or cues from this. I always go into the solutions. I don't want to go read all of this, but really, I think we need to limit the scope from a shotgun thing to a laser beam thing. I think we need to establish a few priorities for every fiscal year and work on those, and not work on, let's say, things that are painted with a broad brush. I've been at this for almost 15 years. I see it as something that's cyclical. Some of the issues are, let's say, priority issues, and then they go away. 5 years later, they come back, and they go away. And it's like the moving targets. It's almost impossible to hit the moving targets. Special standards committees for ASTM, RTCA, and SAE. I think we have enough data now. The FAA, we need data. We should have enough data now that we can start using that as baselines for standards. And I think we need to work on that. Participation on these standards groups should be limited to 5 or 10 people on the committee or team. The participants need to be peer reviewed or vetted, and they need to be SMEs. Anybody been to one of the DAC meetings? Show of hands, nobody? They're populated, there's like 200 people or something, and most of the people are not aviation people or engineers. And I'm not an engineer, and I'm only an aviation person as far as drones are concerned. But I think if you're going to try and come up with standards for aviation and for aircraft, you should have more engineers and more aviation people, and maybe less people who are there speculating about what they think is going to work for aviation in the NAS. And I think you could probably speed things up. The other thing I would like to see is findings vetted and peer reviewed. So other people could take those findings and recommendations and say, that's Just get rid of that, that's cockamamie, or, oh, this has value, this is valid. I think we would speed things up. The other thing I think is no new rules or regulation without being scientifically validated. That is one thing that is really missing from the integration effort in the United States, is there's like no science. Even the stuff that Assure did, which is good, we're putting our toe in the water. Other people that are scientists are like, they're not publishing papers, scientific grade papers that we could go and replicate. So that's an issue. The other thing is a lot of the groups that are people that are on there, they shouldn't be able to peddle their wares. Again, you know, we're going to use 5G from UTM. It's from a guy who works for Verizon. I think that's down the rabbit hole. I think the whole country should be part of the drone pilot integration program. Thinking we're going to have 5 or 10 cities in a country this size for a viable integration program is silly to me. You should be out in the country. If a guy wants to do 300 acres of corn, maybe he needs another endorsement, maybe he needs an aviation band radio, file a flight plan, whatever else. I think they could come up with a practical solution to start out in the country to use these without a UTM system. Not saying that there isn't any risk, but if we were to use science and common sense, I think we would be able to get there faster. I think we need better training, and I definitely believe we need a practical test for the Part 107. People talk about, oh, you know, we want to fly over people, and we want the FAA to hurry up and get on that. We want to fly on people. We don't even know if people know how to fly these things. So you know, you're going to let some guy fly or gal fly a 55-pound drone over people, and we don't know that they can even operate the aircraft. That's kind of crazy. So I think that we need to do that. And I think I don't know, I see people flying, it's like, wow, okay. I'm sure everybody's seen that in their travels. The other thing we're going to do, hopefully roll out when I get a little bit more time, is this ADAPT, and there's some of the people in the room are on that. It's more of a think tank, and really the people here that are listed kind of represent old timers in the industry, kind of know what's going on. And what I hope for us that we will do is hopefully start writing white papers or position papers that we can publish as, let's say, food for thought for instances like now with the call for the repeal of 336. We write something that says, hey, this is the position and these are the things that you should think about. So hopefully as we move forward, you will see something from us as a group. Really, that's all I've got.